Hello, today I got a really nice project for you. So this is gonna be a React beginner project that could be an interview question. So I saw this on a channel called Web Dev Junkie, and I don't know what it is with like the addicts and junkies all in the web development space. So there's coding addict, there's web dev junkie. I don't know, man. Anyways, this project is really cool, and let me explain you what we're gonna be doing so you can try coding it out yourself and then watch my solution afterwards. So what is it about? We're gonna be building a project that has 4 buttons, and each of the buttons is gonna contain exactly one hex value that we randomly generate. At the top of the page, we're gonna have one div that shows one of those values. And pretty much when we click the corresponding button that has the right hex value that is displayed on top, then the game will restart. So it will start from the it'll start from the start. And if we click the wrong one, then there's just going to be a text wrong option, nothing more. And that is going to happen until we click the right one. Now, if you want to expand on this and keep like a score, that's one thing you can do. We're not going to be doing that in my solution at least. And now is your time to try coding that out. And if you want to see my solution, then keep watching. Let's get right into it. Okay, I'm really happy to have you here with me. Let's code this out together. So first off, we're in a brand new Create React app, and I have disabled my GitHub Copilot because that would be probably considered cheating. Okay, and the first thing we're gonna do is remove all the stuff we don't need, which is a lot actually. We don't need all those files. We can get rid of the index CSS. We won't need any of that. Neither will we need this. Well, we can leave just an empty div for now. We can remove all the unnecessary dependencies. By the way, there's a shortcut in VS Code to remove all unused dependencies and also to sort them. So for example, if you're importing something heavy, it will move it to the top and then have the local imports at the bottom. So for me, that is Shift, Alt, and O, and that will just get rid of all the unused imports, which is really cool. Obviously, it doesn't know that this one is unused, the one we just did. So this one right here, it doesn't know it's unused, so it won't remove it, but essentially that's what it does. Okay, so we're in TypeScript, so let's turn this app into a functional component for now. And the first thing I'm gonna do is, because I don't like CSS that much, I'm going to install Tailwind, which is gonna make the bit of CSS we're gonna use, which is not much, but it's just gonna make it a bit more bearable. So let's install Tailwind and also initialize. Oh, what's happening here? Oh, okay, hold up. Let me copy that properly. Just paste it there. Also get the Tailwind initializing command, paste it here. That will create us a Tailwind config.js. And inside of that, we're gonna paste this one. Just paste it in there, save it, and last step is pasting this into our index.css. Alright, and that should basically be the whole setup for Tailwind. Let's try out if it works. Let's give this a text write of 500 and spin up the server. I always confuse it. In React, it's start, and Next.js, which I'm working a lot with, it's a dev. I always mess it up. Okay, so right now, there should be a text app and it should be red. Perfect, that's exactly what we get. So that means we set up Tailwind CSS correctly. And now we can start with the actual project. So we want to display 4 things, right? We want 4 buttons and then one div at the top that contains a random color that we generated. And to do that, we first need to find out how do hex values even work, and how to generate hex value. Like what exactly is a hex value? How are hex values? What are hex color values? Let's see. Okay, so I typed in hex value structure and that actually gave us something useful. So it turns out a hex value is a letter A, B, C, D, E, and F, so one of those, and then followed, no, it's a number and then an alphabetic character from A to F and a number from 0 to 9. Okay, so let's break this up into small functions that each do their part. So the first thing we want, right, is a random number between 0 and 9. Now that should be quite easy. Let's call it get random number. And that is gonna return a math.floor. Let's see if I can do this correctly, because normally this is what the GitHub Copilot excels at. Like these get random numbers and then you can add a comment to tell it what to do. But this time I'm coding that out. So let's do a math.floor of like 9. Wait, no, that's not what we want. We want a math.random and then we want a math.floor of that times 9. So this will generate a random number from 0 to 1, I believe. Yes. So a pseudo random number between 0 and 1. We're going to multiply that by the amount of numbers we basically want to limit this to, which would be 9. So this will return a number of 0 to 9, I believe. And what we want after that is a letter from A to F. So there are multiple approaches we could take. For example, we could first, let's name the function get random letter A to let's just call it get random letter. And now there are multiple approaches we could take here. First is we could have an array of like A, B, and then all the way to F, and then index that like have const random is equal to this, and then add a random index, the same as we did here. We could do that, or I believe there is a string dot, from char code. Now we just need to figure out the char code. JS char codes. We want the uppercase A. So let's look up what that would be. No, I don't think this is what we want. JS A uppercase A char code. Let's see. Okay, so in this one it would be 65 for the character A, 65, 66, 67. Okay, so that means we're gonna have the 65, and let's see what that returns. Const str is equal to that, and let's just log that out to the console. Str is str, and then invoke that function from our app. So const str is equal to whatever this returns. And then we're gonna log out str, which is str, and we don't need that here anymore. Okay, so let's spin up the server. We already did reload the page, and now let's see what get logs to the console. So it's an uppercase A, and essentially what we want now is, starting from that point, we want a random number from 0 all the way to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So string dot from char code 65 plus math.floor math.random, and we would want to invoke that. I believe that should be times 5. So let's try that out. And okay, so D A C A E C E C C A. I can zoom in a bit so you can see it better. But I've never seen an F, so that should probably be 6 instead, right? E, C, E, F. Okay, so this is exactly what we want. We get a random number and we get a random letter. Now it's just about combining those. So let's have a constant of get random combination, which will have one letter and one number. So that would be return, and then we're going to return a template string that has a get. So is the number or the letter first? Okay, so the number is first. So we want the get random number, invoke that, and then as the second one, the second letter of the string, we want the get random letter, also invoke that, and that's how we get a random combination. And now we have a get random hex, and that get random hex will just return a template string, and same thing as above. This really isn't necessary, but I recommend always splitting up functions to do exactly one thing, because that way when your project gets bigger, it's easier to maintain and to add to. So that's why I just split these up into two. In this case, you really wouldn't have to. You could just do this 3 times and it would still be, maintainable. But for larger projects, I advise doing what I'm doing right now, just splitting it up into multiple functions. So get random combination, and we want to have that 3 times. And now if I did everything correct, ideally we would want this to be an actual hex value, and we can just log it out to the console for now. Let's read out the page, inspect the page, and now this is not what we want because we also need to invoke that function. Okay, so 5f3b1a, that should be a hex value, right? Let's see. Let's go to a converter, convert, and that is a color. Great. Is this also a color? It is also a color. Perfect. Now with hex values, we also want to add a hashtag in front of it. Like, I think it's called hashtag in English. Just because that is what hex requires as far as I'm concerned. And now we have actual hex values, and we can try that out by giving this app a background of this value. So we can do that by adding a style tag, and that is called background color, and that is equal to hex. And now that should be perfect. That is now a dark red. If we read out the page, it's always a different color because we are generating the hex value at runtime. Great. Okay, so we have the possibility to get 1 hex value. Now, how do we get 4 of them? That should be pretty easy. Also, a little tip, I would recommend putting these functions into a little helper just so they don't mess up your project. So I usually have a folder called helpers in my projects, and then hex helpers.ts, for instance. We can just have all these, put them in here, and then we can really just export the one we need, because we don't need to import all these. They are just so this function works, so we can just export a single one, import that right here, and that way we save a lot of just screen real estate that is very valuable when you are working on bigger projects. Okay, now we want to have a state, and in that state we want 4 hex values. So let's call it hex values. It's gonna be a string array because each hex value is a string, and then we will initialize that as an empty array. Now, okay, so when this component renders, we want to have a use effect. And what is that use effect gonna do? It's just gonna run at the beginning. So when the component renders, that's why we have an empty dependency array. I might change that in a second though. I think I probably will. And then in the use effect, what do we want to have? So we want 4 hex values right here because we want 4 buttons. Now, if you had 6 buttons, you would want 6 hex values in here. We want 4. So if hex values dot length is less than 4, because if it's equal to 4, then we have what we need. If it's less than 4, then we are gonna set hex values to whatever it was previously. That's what we get in the first argument. So we're gonna spread that into the array, and then what we're gonna push into the array is an instance of what did we call it? Get random hex. Okay, now that will invoke the function. We could also declare that as a constant, but I think this is pretty intuitive. and we will want to run this use effect every time that hex values dot length changes. Great, now this won't work anymore. We can remove that. And now we should have 4 hex values in that array. And I'm not gonna test it right now because one of them worked, so I think this will work. If not, we're gonna see it in a second. Let's get to the styling. So what do we want? We have the app right. At least it's not crashing. That's a good indicator. So we have the app. We would want to give that a maximum width of like 3XL. Center that. Inside of this app, we want to have a div. And now this is gonna be the containing div that contains the background on top and also the buttons. So in here, this is gonna be the top div, and we also want to have the button div that is gonna be of let's do like a half width. Let's see how that looks. It's gonna be a grid. It's gonna have, let's give it 2 columns, little gap, and let's have 1 button for each hex value. So hex values dot map, and for each value we're gonna render out a button that is gonna be of type button, and it will contain the value, which is a string. That's why we can render it here, which is essentially just gonna be the hex code. Great. Okay, so that works. Now that is not in a grid, however, and I'm not sure why. It's a grid with 2 columns, right? Let's give it a background red of 500. Why is that not working? It should put the buttons into 2 columns, right? Let's remove this for a second. It's not doing that, however. Oh, calls. Okay, it needs to be calls. That's, yeah, okay, so that's why it wasn't working. Let's give it a way smaller width though. Let's give it a width of like 10 rem. Yeah, that looks better. And in this div, we want to justify to the center. Also have a width of full. So everything on the screen is just, oh, it should be centered. Oh, what did I do? Oops. This should work now. Okay, now it's in the center. We can remove the background. We can give each button a little background of gray of like 100. So it just looks a bit better. And then a border of gray 200 and rounded small, just so, you know, we have a tiny bit of styling at least. And yeah, let's give it a bit of padding as well. Let's give it a padding of 2 and then a text of small. Now that's that doesn't seem to be working really well, and I am not quite sure why. Oh, probably because I'm zoomed in way beyond anything. So let's give it a bit more space. Okay, that looks better. Great. Now we can remove that. The text is a bit larger. And now above the text, we want to render out one of the hex codes as an actual color. How do we do that? We can declare this div as self-closing. Let's give it a width of 40 and a height of 40. Background red of 500 to see if that's working. That is working, but this should be flex column. So it's above the content and not left to it. And then it's going to be item center instead of justify center, because we have a flex column which switches the things around. Okay, so now we have the red thing on top. Now we don't want to hard code the color, right? We want this to have a dynamic color of any of these 4 options. How would we go about that? I think the easiest way would be to have a constant of random index, so any index of the hex values, and that is gonna be equal to let's see, let's have a math.floor, which is gonna take a math.random, and we're gonna have that times hex values dot length. So that should be one number between 0 and 4. Now with that in place, let's try it out. Let's just log random. Actually, we can just copy it and then log it out to the console. And in theory, that should be a number between 1 and 4. So 1, 2, 0, 3. But it's not 4 because maybe we need to add 1 here. And then, wait, actually, no. We don't need to add that because when we're at index 3, that's the highest one. And that is correct, actually, I think. Okay, with this random index, now we want this div to have a style. And that style is going to be a background color. And that is going to be hex values. So an array of all the hex values we have at the index of random index. And let's see if that works. And that does seem to work. Okay, so one thing I've noticed in the console is these buttons need a key. So let's add a key because we're mapping over them. The first thing in the map always needs a key, so that could be just the value. And now we have a dynamic color changing div right up here, which is great. Let's have a bit of space under this, so margin bottom of 12. And let's give this whole thing a padding Y of 12, just so it looks a bit better. And now, how do we know which button is the right one? Because right now nothing would happen if I click these buttons. We can actually do that in this button. So whenever we click the button, we're gonna have a function. And if the index, which we get as a second parameter of the map, if the index of this button, so I think that would be 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not quite sure. It doesn't really matter. If the index of the button is equal to the random index, then what we want to happen, let's have an alert, and that alert is going to be right. And if it's not, else we're going to have an alert. That alert is going to be wrong. Now, just for simplicity, we'll also show the correct hex value. Let's do it right here. Let's just have the... No, we don't need the value. We need this right here. So hex values at index random index. That way, okay, so this should be the correct option. So 1A4, which would be this button right here. So if I click this, then it should alert, like log out in the window right. And it does. And when I click this one, it should log out wrong. And it logs out wrong. Really nice. Okay, so we got the basics down. This would be wrong, wrong, right. And now the final step would be, we can remove this. The final step would be to reset the game whenever we click the right one and show a little message if we click the wrong one. So to reset this, we can have just a little function, reset game. And what is that reset game function gonna do? It's gonna remove the hex values from the hex values array. So we're gonna set hex values to an empty array. And when we do that, remember this use effect gets run and it sees, okay, or hex values.length is smaller than 4. So we're gonna do this whole thing again and fill it up again. And in theory, that should restart our game correctly. And if it's not, let's have one more state. Call it like wrong button clicked. It's gonna be a boolean and it's gonna be false by default. Now when we click the wrong button, then we're gonna set wrong button clicked to true. And whenever that is true, we want to render out a very small error message. We can render that right here and render that conditionally whenever wrong button is clicked. And in that it's gonna say wrong option. And that is gonna be a text of extra small and a text red of 600. So when we click the wrong one, oh, that was the right one. Wrong option, great. and when we click the right one, it's not gonna remove that state, so that's a problem. So let's handle that in here. We're gonna reset the hex values and also set wrong button clicked to false. So whenever we click the right button, then it will reset the error message. So actually that's because I have no idea how to read hex values. Let's just have the correct value up here, just so I know which one is the right one. Insert that right here. And now this one is the right one. So this the first option, when we click the wrong one, it's gonna say wrong option, but it's also going to change the color, which it shouldn't. So this is the right one. And when I click the wrong one, it changed the color, which is not what we want. So if the index is equal to the random index, it resets the game, and else it sets the wrong button clicked to true. Why is that resetting this color though? Okay, so let's log out the random index, because that does the random index change whenever we click that? Random index, let's log that out, so whenever that state changes. So the random index is 1, and when we click the wrong option, it gets changed to 2 and then 1. Okay, so that is probably not what we want. So we should keep this as a state, because when we are updating the state, because we're not keeping this as state, it's getting rerun. So we would probably want to keep that as state as well. So random index, set random index, that's gonna be a number, and that number is going, what was it before? It's gonna be this by default. So let's remove the rest, have it as this by default, and let's see if that works. So it's 1A4 and this turquoise color. When we click this one, nice. Okay, so it doesn't change the constant that we assigned it to before, because we are keeping it in a state now, which is this one right here. Great, so we can click all we want. These are the wrong options. I'm clicking them right now, nothing happens. But when we click the right option, then this should be removed and the game should be reset. Great, so this is exactly what we want. Perfect. I hope you enjoyed this project. I hope you managed to do it yourself. And if not, then I really hope that you'll be able to do it by yourself now. I wish you a lot of fun with the new knowledge I hope you gained from this video, applying it to your own projects. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one, and bye bye. Okay, hold up. Before I end this video, I've actually really enjoyed building this project, so I tried playing this game a bit myself, and I've noticed the first option is always the right one, and that is not ideal for a game. So let's fix that. And the reason why that is because of this random function right here. Because the hex values is always initialized as an empty array, this will always be initialized as 0, and that's not ideal. So I think the fix would be to either have like a hard-coded for here that should work. So now the first option shouldn't be the right one anymore. No, it's not. Okay, great. Now the problem with that would be that it might not be ideal to maintain, because you might want to change the amount of buttons that there are, and then you would have to remember, oh, this 4 is because of this and that. Obviously you could have like a comment up here, but it's not ideal to maintain, and I want to teach you how to write good code. So let's initialize that as 0, and whenever we have all the hex values right here, because if hex values length is less than 4, then we don't have all, but if it's equal to 4, then we have all the values we need. And then we're gonna have the setter function, set random index for the state, and then we're gonna set random index to math.floor, so that's gonna round down pretty much a math.random, and that math.random will be multiplied by hex values.length. And let's see if that works. So the right option is 2A to D1A, and that the option is the second one. 6A, it's the first one. 2C, it's again the first one, but that was apparently like a coincidence. 6E, 8C, so that is this one. 0A, it's down here. 8C, it's also down here. Okay, so as you can see, we fixed the problem. Now it's truly random. I mean, not truly random because it's a computer generating the random number, but you know what I mean. It is like pretty much random, and that is exactly what we wanted, because a game where the first option is always the right one is not the ideal game, you know? Okay, and with that said, I do wish you a lot of fun implementing this into your own projects. I had a lot of fun working on this project, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.